They're calling her the next big thing to come out in children's literature. Join me as I sit down with author Effie Higgins, author of The Black Book of Secrets. Coming up next on Books Alive. So much for joining us today. I have a real treat for you all. In the studio with me, just recently from across the pond, from England, is the one and only Effie Higgins. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, this is a real treat. And I want to congratulate you because I understand that you were nominated for the Waterstone Children's Book Award.
That's true. I didn't win it, but I was nominated, so I was very pleased with that, especially as it's my first book, my first literary effort.
Yeah, that's great. That's really exciting. And the book that we're going to be looking at today, I don't know how many of our readers are familiar with them yet.
Right.
So I thought we would start off with the first book that you wrote. And it's been out for what? In a year now?
Well, it came out in the UK last January.
Okay.
So it came out in January, and the paperback came out before Christmas, so it's quite busy last year.
And this is a bestseller in the UK, is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah,
yes,
that's what I've been reading, so that's fabulous. Kids must just be eating it up.
It's been a great start, actually, I have to say. We tour around local schools as well, and we do some acting from the second book, and get the children up to act out scenes from the actual book, so it really brings it to life for them.
Oh, how
But they've
great.
generally read the Black Book of Secrets first as well. So.
All right, well, I've seen the words grotesque and repulsive and hideous, and you look very normal. So, all right, my dear, where has this come from?
It's actually really difficult to answer that question because I think people are expecting me to say I had, I don't know, some dreadful trauma in my childhood. But actually, it literally comes from the end of the pen. It just comes straight out of my head. It's made up. It's all from my imagination. And I always say, I think I'm writing the sort of books that I would have liked to have read when I was 9 or 10 or 11. And it's just, maybe it's some sort of obsession. There is a lot of grotesqueness in there, and some people would describe it as quite gory, but I don't think it's that gory. It's certainly not graphically gory, and I would avoid gratuitous scenes of violence and gore. But I like to leave a lot of it up to the children's imagination as well, because then they're able to create themselves the fear or the gore factor. So.
Well, you start out with a bang there, with our friend running for his life. I mean, I would run from those parents too.
Yes, his parents are trying to extricate his teeth so they can sell them for money because they're basically alcoholics addicted to gin. And this seems to be a bit of a running theme, actually. I'm working on the third book at the moment, and we're certainly mentioning gin again, and the gin-soaked wretches of the south side of Urbs, the evil city where so many things take place.
The same dry humor that you are using right now does show up in your book as well, and I wanted to compliment you on that. It just sort of sneaks in every now and then as a really great counterbalance to some of the stench of the river or something,
I think if you lived somewhere like that, if you lived in Urbs, you'd have to have a sense of humour to survive, basically, because it really is the most miserable place. In the Black Book of Secrets, a lot of the action takes place away from the city in the village of Pagus Parvus, which is equally miserable. Up the side of a mountain. I think it's permanently snowing, and the sun only shines once, and everyone thought it was a miracle, and that was for about 5 seconds, and then the clouds came back over again. So yes, you need a sense of humour. You've got to lighten it a bit. You need a bit of light relief.
Well, speaking of light relief, let's talk about your characters a little bit, because our friend here, Ludlow Fitch, clings to a carriage.
Yes, yes.
And what a carriage to pick.
He picks the carriage of Jeremiah Ratchet, who only comes to the city to gamble, basically, to drink and to gamble. And then he goes back to Pagus Parvis, and Ludlow's escaping his parents. He was also being pursued by the dentist. I don't know if you could really call him a dentist. I think he just had some implements that you could use to take teeth out. They weren't necessarily designed for that.
That's horrifying.
Everybody mentions that opening scene, actually, and I certainly don't think it's the most horrifying thing that I've written, but I think with teeth, there's something about teeth, it upsets people to think that could
And no anesthetic was going to be involved, it was going to be a yanking thing.
Yes, you just hoped that it was quick.
Yeah.
But I think the dentist, Barton Gumroot, I think he had his knee on Ludlow's chest at one stage, and I'm sure that would have helped if he pulled hard enough. And he was strapped down.
It's a wonder the lad got away.
Yes, yeah. I think he had a bit of a headache afterwards when he turns up in the village.
Great heart, that kid.
Yeah.
But he ends up slogging into that town and then finds himself peering in the window of...
He looks into Joe Zabadoo's pawn shop. And Joe Zabadoo is literally turned up that evening as well. But that sort of theme of fateful meetings runs through the book as well. And Ludlow, in fact, does want to leave at one stage. I mean, he's been brought up a pickpocket. His parents basically trained him to be a pickpocket. And they were only, I think, because they were so gin-soaked, that's why they decided they needed a bit more money, and they were trying to see how else they could utilise their son in the pursuit of alcohol.
What great parents!
He gets, but possibly they could be redeemed in the future. You never know. And they do turn up again in book 3, in the third book, which I'm doing at the moment.
Oh my!
Which is I've decided to call it the Eyeball Collector.
Oh, that's great.
So just continuing with this theme, as you say, of the grotesque and hideous.
Yes.
So anyway, Ludlow turns up in Pagus Parvis and he comes across Joe Zabadoo in his pawn shop and just watches him basically unpacking. You know, one of those bags that doesn't seem to have a bottom.
Very Mary Poppins.
Yes, all these things are coming out, and he actually manages to take out a glass tank that he keeps a frog in. So I always think that the book, I would never say it's pure fantasy. It's not pure fantasy in the way that maybe other books with possibly dragons or wizardry are fantasy.
Right.
I like to think of it as it's my own reality. And it's a heightened reality. So everything's just a little bit odd, but you would still believe that these things could happen. That's what I wanted. I wanted children to read it and think, yes, this could happen, but there's a touch of something in there. Which is another reason why I've been so vague about when it's been set. So it's a few hundred years ago. They're all on horses. Or on foot.
All right.
The unfortunate ones.
Right.
Who can't afford a carriage. So.
And I was going to say, Joe Zabadoo himself is a very mysterious person. I mean, to me, it did seem, I almost felt like one of the villagers where you knew he was capable of something more than just the average mortal.
But he keeps saying, I can't change anything. And the villagers at one stage, they're begging him, please help us, because of Jeremiah Ratchet, the local villain. And he's going, I'm not allowed to alter the course of things. But just because he's there, that things are going to change.
Right.
But it's almost as if he doesn't want to take responsibility for anything. But he's a force for good.
Right.
But he can't actually actively do anything. He can't be seen to actively have a hand in anything.
He's got rules.
Yes, he does. He has rules that he has to live by, and Ludlow's always trying to work out what these rules are.
Yes.
And he realises at the end, there's a bit of a revelation at the end for Ludlow, what it's all about, really. So, but yes, Joe is... He's a mysterious chap.
Yeah, that was wonderful. That's a wonderful character. Now, Ludlow gets a job. Well, he gets apprenticed, and he has a task.
Yes.
You want to talk about your task?
He has to, as the book is the Black Book of Secrets. Joe has the Black Book of Secrets. And he's not your average pawnbroker. He pays people for their secrets. Now, it's a very small village, but everybody seems to have been up to something in the past, which is great. So they all traipse up to Joe's pawnbroking shop at midnight, and they tell him their secrets. Ludlow has to write them in the Black Book of Secrets. That's his job. And even Ludlow at one stage realises that this book could be incredibly valuable. You know, as a reason for blackmail, certainly you could find so many things in there. So he's tempted. He's definitely is tempted occasionally. But so Joe pays the villagers money, and plenty of money, for these secrets, and then obviously there's going to be somebody else who wants to get their hands on the book, you see.
Well, the characters that come out of the town, I mean, Horatio
Cleaver, the butcher.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I think kids are going to read that and they're going to go, oh, gross, and they're going to love every second of it.
He's a funny chap. I mean, he's very well-meaning, and it was just unfortunate what happened in his past, really. But I like to think of him. I think I described him as looking a bit like the meat that he actually spends his whole day chopping up.
The
and he's
hairless
got very,
lamb
That's right.
shanks.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. I mean, I really imagine these things when I'm writing them. You really feel, and someone like Jeremiah Ratchet, whose pores oozing, I think it was brandy, he'd been on the booze the night before, and but then with Horatio Cleaver, the fact that the ends of his fingers are quite stunted because you know it keeps it's not quite as accurate with his cleaver as it could be. But Joe got a pork chop out of him, I think, didn't he? It flew off the counter.
Well, I enjoyed the rat's toes that will emerge at one point there.
Yes. I'm not sure how much to give away here.
Exactly. We
but
don't
it's like, how did you know it was a rat? Well,
yes.
When I looked between my teeth.
Oh, yes. And the coffin maker. I mean, there seems to be this fascination with coffins and corpses here.
And you're referring to the grave digger, are you, Obadiah Strang?
And yes. Well, and then the one that
the coffin maker later on in the book. Yes. Well,
but Obadiah himself. Yes.
Obadiah with his hands like permanently like this from digging, but at least he can hold his bottle of ale. Fits quite nicely. So, they've all got their dire secrets, their skeletons in the cupboard.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that would be most frightening to any young reader or adult reader would be to imagine themselves enclosed in a coffin and buried somewhere.
Yes, and that comes up again in the Bone Magician with Godfrey Gaufridus, the undertaker, who does design. He works on designing ways for people to indicate that they are not dead, even though everybody thinks they are. Possibly they're in a coma, or because he himself went through that dreadful stage himself when he was very ill.
Horrifying.
And his parents are standing over him going, oh, we think he's dead, let's bury him. He's thinking, no, I'm not, don't bury me.
Oh my gosh, yes. Well, you were saying that the Black Book of Secrets, and probably the Bone Magician too, are books that you would have wanted to have read when you were 9 or 10 years old. What did you read?
Well, when I was 9 or 10 years old, I do remember going through a phase of reading horror stories. Okay. And really quite gory, quite graphic horror books. And I wouldn't read them today. This is the thing. I certainly have limits now, and certainly when I'm writing, that I can't write anything that I would find too repulsive or too revolting to read myself, which I think is good, because you can't go too far. Right. And as I said, a lot of this is in the children's imagination anyway. They imagine it, they make it worse than it is. You're just giving them a hint, really. So I'm a bit like Joe here, just taking no responsibility. But I certainly went through a horror phase, but I would be quite...
Did you have authors that you can remember that you always turned to?
I think if we set the horror aside, I think I was fairly conventional, and certainly read The Hobbit or the Tolkien, the Lord of the Rings, all of those, the Narnia books. And then as I got a little bit older, I started reading historical fiction, and the writers. I can't remember the name of the particular authors.
Did you read Sherlock Holmes?
I read him later in life, actually, and possibly I should imagine that he has influenced my style to an extent. Certainly the way that people speak, everything. When I do write these conversations, it seems to be coming from about 200 years ago, regardless. So I think that's why I've gone back to that, and I like to set everything there. It's just very natural. It happens very naturally. I don't know if I've never attempted to write anything modern. I don't think I haven't attempted to write anything modern. I don't know how successful I would be at that, because I like this world they're living in and the way they speak and the things they do.
And it just comes out your pen.
It really does. And I'm often asked, have you planned all this in advance?
Right.
And I say, no, it's fiction, and to a great extent I make it up as I go along.
Wow.
But I do create the characters, have the characters in mind first. And Joe Zabadu was one of my first really good characters, somebody that I was happy with and felt he was quite, he wasn't, he was three-dimensional, or, you know what I mean, he had more depth than, he wasn't just
very
a sort
real
of card,
for you.
but yes, it's almost like having him in the room when I'm writing about him. And then again, people like Jeremiah Ratchet was just so repulsive. And then, people like Perigo with her little winking eye, and just trying to make them real. So,
do you have a grand plan for them all? I mean,
I'm not as organised in that respect as I think some authors are. I don't have a grand plan. I think a lot of my stories come from the characters themselves. They help to write the book and to drive it. And I know that there are certain things, once the character's created and you've got a good idea of what they're like, there are certain things that they would never do, so you never write that, because you just know they wouldn't do it. And often the characters themselves suggest to you what they would do, and that leads you further down the story. I mean, obviously I've got an idea of the whole story, but it's how it's going to be exexecuted. I couldn't tell you at the very beginning how it's going to be executed. But
do you know how many books you're going to do?
I just want to keep on going.
Right.
So one a year is the aim at the moment. So and I've just about finished the third one, and at the same time as writing the third, I'm thinking about the fourth. You see.
Wonderful!
But I couldn't tell you right now what direction it's going to go in. But certainly the Eyeball Collector, this third one, certainly hasn't wrapped everything up yet. There's mileage in Pagus Parvis and Herbs Umida.
Oh my gosh,
yes,
I love it.
It is about a fellow who collects eyeballs. I think sometimes you've got to be just quite straightforward with these things. There's no point trying to be clever. So
well, we're going to take a short break right now, but when we come back, we're going to pick up and be looking at the paraquel to the Black Book of Secrets, and that is the Bone Magician. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Big dreams and good grades aren't enough to get into college. There are actual steps you need to take. Finding someone who can help is the first and most important. For the next steps, go to knowhowtogo.org.
Pants. I am folding the pants. The pants are long. Do they go on my head? Do they? Do the pants go on my head? No. They go on.
Everyday moments can become teaching moments because learning starts long before school does. Give your child the start they need at bornlearning.org.
Welcome back, and I am sitting here today and having a delightful conversation with my new friend from England, F.E. Higgins. Thanks again for being here with us. We just finished talking about the Black Book of Secrets, and she's done something really cool that a lot of authors, I don't know if they've thought of doing, and that is she wrote a paraquel. And not a prequel, not a sequel, but a paraquel, which means it's, sort of meanwhile back at the ranch, what's going on back there. And this is the Bone Magician, and your covers are so cool.
They're fabulous, yes.
They're really
good, yeah.
All right, now tell us, what is a bone magician?
A bone magician is somebody who can bring dead bodies back to life, basically. And the reason they would do this is because in the world that I've created, people believe that if a body is revitalized, or in this case, actually in the case of the bone magician, he's got a skeleton that he carries around with him that he brings back to life. People believed that you could ask them questions about the future and about the past, and it's almost like the bone magician is almost a traveling showman. and he goes around the country and he puts on this little show where everyone pays sixpence, and by means of various potions and spells and summoning words, he brings his skeleton back to life, and the audience just ask questions.
Wow. Yeah, that was really cool. I could imagine that you would have a few unfinished things that you would want to run back and ask,
Yes.
Where's the money? Or
Yes, exactly. Exactly. That does crop up at one stage in the book. And also there's a chap who wants he basically is looking for his girlfriend's forgiveness because she was very unfortunately run over by a cart just after they'd had an argument. So he thought he would avail of the Bow Magician services. You see.
I thought that was really kind of you to put that in there for him. That was really great. All right, now Ludlow Fitch and Joe Zabadoo, it's fade to black on them. They're not in this.
But
we have a whole new friend.
We have indeed. We have the Bow Magician himself called Benedict Pantages, and then another boy character called Pin Carpew. But if you are familiar with the Black Book of Secrets, then the surname Carpew is going to ring a bell as well. And this is one of the reasons I wrote a paraquel, which I do believe I might actually have invented myself.
Cool.
I feel that possibly this is my invention,
Very nice.
this is my word.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And so the two books, the Black Book of Secrets and the Bow Magician, are happening in parallel, and you'll find with the Black Book, everything's happening in Pagus Parvis, a small village. And they're always talking about the city. And I think I give it a capital C because, it's the city and it's this vile and evil place. And so in the Bow Magician, the action has actually moved to the city and we give it a name. It's now called Urbs Umida. So because the two stories are happening in parallel, it does mean that some of the characters from the first book can crop up in the second. And Jeremiah Ratchet makes a very brief appearance, but basically I've been able to have a whole new cast of characters for this story, and which is what I wanted to do. I love Joe Zabadoo and I love Ludlow, but I think I want to use new characters. So we've got a whole new cast of characters in here. We've got the Bow Magician, we've got Pin Carpew, who basically is in the city. He wants to find out what has happened to his father, Oscar Carpew, who's been accused of murder. So that's his motivation throughout the book, and that's how their paths actually cross, his and the Bone Magician's.
Now we meet him in the most grotesque circumstances at the very beginning of the book.
Well, yes, he has quite an interesting job. He's a body watcher. And the reason he got this job was because he was practically the only boy in the city who could read. So when Godfrey Galfridus, the undertaker, put a little card in his window, I need someone to come and watch over bodies, Pin was just about the only one who could read it. So he was the only one who applied for the job. And again, in this world, as I say, that I've created, because it is a few hundred years ago, I say, people didn't actually know definitively if somebody was dead. So they would employ people like Pin to watch over bodies. And he watches over them for 3 days and 3 nights because he thinks if they haven't moved after 72 hours, there's a very good chance they are actually dead. And he also uses the sniff test. He has a very powerful sense of smell, so he can smell if they're going off a bit right. So this is how, as you said, we were talking about the beginning of the book, we come across Pin watching over the body of Sybil, poor dead Sybil as we refer to her. But unfortunately he has been drugged. He's under the influence of some drug that's been administered to him, and he's able to see what's going on and hear, but he can't move and he can't talk. And 3 people basically have broken into this room where he's watching over the body, and events occur, things happen, and he watches.
And he's got some wonderful things he does, poking their feet with pins and things like that. I mean, that gets the gross thing going on. That's pretty cool.
When he's actually being interviewed by the undertaker, the undertaker's always desperate to have live people to test his I think they're tongue pullers and ear pokers and toe prickers. Horrible. Yes. Pin actually undergoes some of these tests for whether or not somebody is actually alive. So.
Now this one was very much a murder mystery.
Yes,
there is. The silver apple killer keeps rearing his ugly head.
The serial killer, yes, absolutely. That's ongoing. There's an awful lot going on in it, actually. And all the characters have, they've got their own tale to tell. So Pin's with his body watching, but he meets up with the bone magician to try to find out what's going on with his father. But the bone magician himself has an assistant, a young girl called Juno, who has her own problems. And yes, she has her own problems. And then there's you've got Aleph Bunkum, who is a head reader. He reads the bumps on people's heads.
That.
But they're all after money, basically. They're all trying to earn a living. They're trying to find a way to earn a living in this horrific city. And it's very much a divided city, isn't it? You've got the river flowing through the middle. You've got the rich people on the north side. You've got the poor people on the south.
Pronounce the name of the river.
The Feedus.
It is the
river
Feedus.
Feedus. Yes,
Okay.
yes, the river Feedus. It's
All
sort of a toxic soup running through the centre of the city. But you're always thinking, you know, who's better here, the people on the north side or the people on the south side? Because the south siders are painted as villains and criminals. But Pin observes, you know, there's an honesty about these people. You know where you are, where you're on the south side. You know you're going to be smelly, you're going to be dirty, and you know you can't trust anyone. Whereas on the north side, the rich people they're quite two-faced, really, and they're operating their own scams in their own way. So, and I'm sure the children would read the book and be thinking, do I want to live on the north or do I want to live on the south?
Oh, that's a neat insight. Yeah.
And then, as I say, the whole way through the book, you've got the serial killer who's being reported on by Deodatus Snowd, the local journalist. He's quite an interesting character in his own way.
Where'd you get the name for him?
Deodatus. Well, Deodatus means God-given, and he's an unfortunate-looking fellow. He prefers to stay in during the day, only goes out when night falls, for reasons which are very obvious when you read the book. And then Snowd. Snowd's quite interesting, actually. It is a surname. It is an English surname. And somebody mailed me quite recently and said they were looking into the history of this surname because it was their family surname. And they're saying, oh, you know, we saw you used it in your book. Do you have any information about this? What do you know about Snowd? And I had to email back and say, actually, I saw it on a road sign and I thought it would be really a great surname for one of my characters. So I couldn't give him any insight into his family's surname.
Oh, that's great. There's a great scene. You're talking about how true these Southsiders are, and there's a great scene where the one guy who he really considers himself a bard or a poet, and he wants to, you know, be that. And the guy's like, he looks around and he's like, "You got anything else you can do?"
Yes, he makes friends with Aleph Bunkum. This is Biag Hickory, who's a dwarf who turns up in the city looking for, again, trying to make a living. And he's a very talented, educated fellow. And he loves to write poetry. His poetry is not particularly literary, shall we say. It rhymes. There's a good rhyming in it. And he loves to sing, and he would love to earn his living entertaining people. But Aleph says, you know, there are not a lot of people in this city who are going to pay to hear that. And he says, you know, can you do anything else? And he says, well, I can throw potatoes. And for some reason, he's particularly good at throwing potatoes. So he tends to stand outside the Nimblefinger Inn and catch, well, all the drunks, basically, who come out and think they can beat him at potato throwing. But of course they can't, because they can hardly stand up at this stage.
Well, it's so great because you've got all these funny little things going on with all the individual characters. Then you've got this gluttonous beast down in the basement, and then you've got this ominous silver apple killer lurking out there every night. You don't want anybody going out at night.
Toxic death in the feeders, basically. Yes. So, yes, the gluttonous beast. Well, he has quite a vital role to play, actually, but I'll say no more because I don't want to give anything away. But he's a particularly vile creature who is in a cage in a cellar in the Nimblefinger. A lot of the action takes place in this Nimblefinger Inn, and so it's a sort of a den of iniquity with all the locals in there plotting their crimes. And then upstairs you got Benedict Pantages with his bone magician tricks, and then down in the cellar you have this gluttonous beast on show. It's very much, I think, influenced by Victorian side shows and travelling shows and the freak shows, and the beast just sits there and he's biding his time. I think he's biding his time. And people again pay literally just to see him.
I like the lace hanky part. I really connected
Yes,
with him
yes,
in that
he
moment.
picks
You
up
know,
the
yes,
hanky,
he's
yes.
a sensitive fellow.
Yes,
I
you get a
guess.
bit of an insight into him, don't you? I mean, patience is a virtue, isn't it? And I think Joe says that, doesn't he? Everything comes to those who wait, basically. And the beast is there like everybody else, just waiting for his opportunity.
Well, you know, we were talking. Owen Colfer says, the one and only Artemis Fowl, says that if you're looking for the new big thing, you are it.
Yes. Well,
Yes.
I mean, what can I say? Obviously, I respect his opinion very highly. Yes, I was very pleased when he said that. That was.
And you were telling me that you had known him.
Well, yes, it was quite odd actually, because I actually went to college with him. Now this is 20 years ago, which is probably giving a lot more away than I usually would. But we were very good friends for three years at college, and he stayed in Ireland, and I moved to England and started working in England. So I haven't seen him for a very long time. But my mum sent me when he first had. I think when Artemis Fowl came out and he was becoming successful. My mum sent me, because my mum lives in Ireland. She sent me a newspaper article. She said, "Didn't you know this chap?" And I said, "Oh yes." I thought it was amazing. It was really, it was quite inspirational actually to see when it's that close to you like that. You see someone achieving that sort of success, and you think, well, actually, they're not somebody many miles away that I don't know at all. I thought, this is somebody I know, and I know what they were like, and I'm not at all surprised actually at how successful he's been. I think that was always going to be the case, but it certainly spurred me on a bit, I must admit.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Oh, that's really interesting to know. Now, you came out of college, and your first thing was not writing, right?
I started to work. I worked, and I trained as a teacher, so I came to England and I taught. But always one of those people, I want to write a book, I'm going to write a book, and eventually I did. I think that's the differentiation, isn't it, between the people who say they want to and the people who actually do. But it took me a long time to actually get down to doing it, I have to say. And in sometimes I wish I'd been a bit more motivated earlier on. But then I think a lot of what I did over the last 15 years or so, that has influenced my writing. And I have 2 or 3 other children's books which I've written, but they're in a brown cardboard box in the attic, and they'll probably stay there. Possibly there are a few good ideas in there, but very much a training ground. And I always say this to the children when I go around to the schools and talk to the children. I say, look, if you want to be successful at it, the key really is perseverance, and also you've got to write. People will say, write every day. And I think maybe not every day, but certainly regularly. And just don't be put off by rejections.
So you submitted your early manuscripts and got your rejections?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I sent them the postage. They sent them back. So, but when it started to change was when, especially with the Black Book of Secrets, I thought I've done something here. I've finally honed my skills, or I found my voice. Something's happened, because I was still getting rejections initially, but in the letters, the publishers and the agents were suggesting ways to make it better. So instead of one line saying thanks, but no thanks, I was saying, well, we like this. It's not quite right for us, but if you try this, and a lot of it was actually making it a bit longer, I think, trying to get a better length.
Okay.
And I took their advice. I thought, why not? You know, these are the professionals. These guys know what they're talking about.
Listen
and
up.
it worked. It actually worked.
That's really exciting to know.
But I think doing the 3 books previously, you did every book. Each book was quite bad, but each one was less bad, you know, and eventually you do hone your skill.
Fun.
You find your way.
Gosh. Yeah. Now, you're not only an author, you're also a mom.
Oh, yes.
And I wanted to ask, you know, what do you read around the house when you're reading to your own child?
Well, my daughter's coming up for 6, so we're into picture books in a big way, and she's starting to read herself, and I'm hoping. I remember as a child, I read everything I could get my hands on. I loved reading, and I'm hoping that, you know, that it's going to sort of click with her. That at the moment it's a bit of a struggle, and I think she sees it more as a bit of hard work. You see, but I know soon. I'm very hopeful that she's going to realise, no, this is a whole new world that's going to open up. So we do read. On. Yes, yeah. On this sort of, we read a lot. And she loves being read to,
Oh,
but
I'll
I'm
bet.
waiting for that next step.
Uh-huh.
But she's very good at finding
great.
my books, though. She can find my books in the bookshops.
She can read that much.
Yeah, she can read that. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, you know, I was talking to you earlier before we sat down to tape about this sort of the state of literacy, and, you know, the polls and the studies here in the United States are, you know, giving us this dire news that our young kids here in the United States are not reading. And I wondered how things are going over in England, if the kids are excited about books and reading and how that goes.
I think, I mean, I only know really what I read in the newspapers, and to a great extent they tend to jump on the negative. So I should imagine that we're experiencing the same sorts of problems that you are.
Okay.
Because I would think that really there's so many distractions these days. When I was young, you know, we didn't have computers, or we weren't even allowed to watch the television that much. My father would, if he went out, he'd say no television, and he'd come back. When he came back, he would feel the back of the television to see if it was warm.
Oh, no wonder you write about parents.
Well,
no.
Well, yeah. Yes. So I think today they've got all their various computer games, they've got the computers, there's so much television, 24 hours of television, all those children's channels, and it's so instant. And I think, I mean, I'm only sort of guessing at this myself, but I can imagine that must have affected concentration spans as well. And even the fact that there's just more noise in a house these days than there used to be, to actually be able to go and sit down somewhere and read a book. I think it's harder. But I think that, you know, with Harry Potter, I think that has turned things around slightly. It's certainly given children the idea that you can get an enormous amount of pleasure from reading. There are other ways of entertaining yourself, and I'm sure that was instrumental in that.
Exactly.
So I'm hopeful that that will continue, that it will change.
Well, and you know, I have a feeling these two books right here and the Eyeball Collector, that's coming out in February, are going to bring a lot to kids. I mean, there's just tremendous humor and goriness and murder mystery and everything else, and they're really just really wonderful. And thank you so much for coming in today. It was really a pleasure to meet you, and had a lot of fun reading your books.
Thank you very much indeed.
And I hope you all enjoyed the conversation that we had today. And come on into the library and get these two. And in February, we're going to have that third one. Thanks so much for joining us. And as always, come see us at the library.